Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when the invitation came, as simple as it was surprising. My neighbor, Evelyn, waved to me from her porch as I stepped outside to collect the mail. I'd known her in that distant, familiar way neighbors often know each other, enough to exchange pleasantries, nod at passing holidays, maybe comment on the weather. But never more than that. She lived 2 doors down, always kept a tidy garden, and wore scarves in a way that made them look like poetry rather than clothing. "Come by for tea if you've got a minute," she called out. Her voice carried with a kind of warmth I hadn't realized I'd been missing. I paused, smiled politely, and said I'd love to. I hadn't really planned on going, not because I didn't want to, but because, well, life. It always seems too full or too empty, never in between. But that day, something tugged at me. Maybe it was the way she looked at me, not just waving, but seeing me. I glanced down at my slippers, decided they were just fine for tea, and headed down the walk to her house. Evelyn greeted me with the scent of chamomile and lemon rind, the door creaking open like it had been waiting for me. She wore a loose cream sweater, soft against her pale skin, and her silver blonde hair was pinned up with a few strands falling loose at the temples. She looked radiant in a quiet, lived-in way. A woman who knew her space and made peace with it. We sat in her sunroom, the late afternoon light streaming through tall windows. Plants crowded the corners, lavender, fern, ivy crawling up shelves like eager conversation. I noticed an old photo frame on the side table beside her, though I couldn't quite make out the faces. Everything about her home felt personal, but not invasive. Like walking into someone's memory and being gently invited to stay a while. "I've been meaning to invite you for ages," she said as she poured the tea, her hands steady. "But I wasn't sure if you'd be interested in conversation." Her eyes met mine across the teacups. There was something more there, unspoken. A tremble under the surface. "I'm always interested in conversation," I said, surprised by the truth in my own voice. We began with the usuals. How long we'd lived here. My job in the library. Her late husband, who passed 5 years ago. But it didn't feel like small talk. It felt like building something. Layer by layer, like slowly unwrapping a gift you didn't expect to receive. "You remind me of myself, you know," she said at one point, cupping the tea close to her chest. Before I understood the difference between being alone and being lonely. That line hummed between us like smoke from a candle. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I looked at her, really looked. There was strength in her, yes, but also something unresolved. "What changed that for you?" I finally asked. She smiled a little sadly. "A woman I met years ago. She wasn't anyone special. Or maybe she was. We just started talking. Like this. And little by little, my heart opened to things I didn't know I needed. Or wanted." Her words stirred something inside me, a quiet ripple against the surface of my carefully kept life. I'd always played it safe. Married young. Divorced before 50, grown children who called from time to time. I had routines and recipes and a garden that mostly took care of itself. But I hadn't had this quiet intimacy, this sense of someone truly seeing me, for longer than I cared to admit. "I always thought I'd have all the answers by now," I said, almost to myself. Evelyn laughed gently. "Oh, darling. The answers are never as important as the questions. And asking them with someone beside you, that's where the real meaning lies." There was something in the way she said it. No agenda, no pressure. Just truth wrapped in gentleness. I felt a flicker in my chest, a kind of vulnerability I hadn't let myself feel in years. I looked down at my tea, watched the steam dance, and said, "Tell me more about her." She hesitated, fingers brushing the rim of her cup. "She was brave," she said finally, "not because she marched or fought or shouted, but because she let herself be honest, even when it scared her. She made me question everything I thought I knew about love, about comfort, about being a woman in a world that often asks us to quiet ourselves." Her voice softened to almost a whisper. "And when she left, I missed her more than I ever missed my husband." The room fell still, except for the ticking of an old clock. My throat felt tight, and I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the openness, the rawness. Maybe it was recognizing pieces of myself in her story. "I don't know if I've ever let anyone that close," I said quietly. "Maybe it's time you did," Evelyn replied. Our eyes met again, and this time something passed between us. Unspoken, undefined, but unmistakably real. A connection, deep and immediate, like threads of something ancient being drawn together again. The light shifted outside, shadows stretching across the floor, like they too were settling in for something more. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to go back to my silent house with its perfectly folded throws and empty calendar. She reached out, her hand brushing mine. Just barely, just enough. "You're welcome here any time," she said. And I believed her. That night, as I walked back home, the world felt slightly different, softer, less lonely. I touched the place on my hand where hers had lingered and thought about all the things I hadn't allowed myself to want. But now, maybe I would. The next day, I baked a small loaf of banana bread, my favorite comfort recipe, and found myself knocking on her door again, heart pounding a little louder than usual. When she opened it, the smile that spread across her face made the whole world feel warmer. "I was hoping you'd come," she said, and I stepped inside. The sun had just begun its slow descent, casting a honey-colored glow over Evelyn's porch as I stepped inside for the second time that week. I didn't even knock this time. She saw me coming through the lace curtains and opened the door before I reached it, her face lighting up in a way that made my heart flutter without warning. The scent of cinnamon and orange peel greeted me like an old friend. Her house felt warmer than before, cozier somehow, as if it had been waiting to exhale. I carried the banana bread in my hands like an offering, and she received it with both hands, her fingers brushing mine again. Longer this time, with a kind of ease that hadn't been there yesterday. "I made coffee today," she said, ushering me into the kitchen. "I thought maybe we'd need something stronger." I smiled and slipped off my light sweater, draping it over the back of one of her kitchen chairs. "I like strong." Her laugh was soft and smooth, like the sound of silk being folded. She poured the coffee, the mugs mismatched and chipped at the edges, each one clearly a story of its own. She set mine down in front of me, then sat across with that same calm energy that drew me in from the start. It didn't take long for the conversation to pick up again. We didn't tiptoe around politeness this time. It was as though we had both agreed, silently, that there was no need for masks here. Not between us. "You said yesterday that you missed her more than your husband," I said carefully. "Do you regret not choosing her?" Evelyn tilted her head and looked at me for a moment, like she was weighing which parts of herself to reveal. "I regret not being braver," she finally said. "But I also understand why I wasn't." Back then, the idea of living that kind of truth, it felt like lighting a match in a room full of secrets. I had a marriage, children, a church group. Expectations. She never asked me to choose, but the world made me feel like I had to. I nodded slowly. That kind of fear. I think I've felt it too. Her eyes softened. "Tell me." I hesitated, my hands wrapped around the warm mug as if it might protect me from my own words. "I had a friend in college," I said. "Her name was Maya. We shared everything: books, cigarettes, long walks in the rain. Once, during a storm, the power went out, and we stayed up all night talking. And somewhere between midnight and morning, she kissed me. Evelyn said nothing, but her gaze never left mine. I kissed her back," I continued. "And then I spent the rest of the semester pretending it never happened. I told myself I was confused, that it didn't mean anything. But I never forgot the way it made me feel. Seen, desired, real." A silence settled over the kitchen, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was thick with something tender and unfinished. "You never told anyone?" she asked. "Never," I replied. "Until now." She reached across the table again, taking my hand in both of hers. Her grip was firm but gentle, grounding me. I felt my breath catch. I hadn't been touched like that in years. Not with intention, not with care. "You know," she said, "it's never too late to reclaim the parts of ourselves we buried for the comfort of others." Her words hit me deep, like they were waking something inside me that had been dozing for decades. I felt the sting of tears at the corners of my eyes, and I didn't even try to hide them. I'd spent so much time trying to be what everyone needed, I whispered. A good wife, a good mother, a good neighbor. And now that everyone's gone or grown or moved on, I don't know who I am without those roles. Evelyn stood up and walked around the table. She knelt beside me, not dramatically, not with any kind of grand gesture, but simply, deliberately. She looked up at me from where she knelt and said, "Then let's find out who you are, together." I exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I didn't nod or speak. I just leaned forward and let my forehead rest against hers, our breaths mingling in the stillness of her kitchen. There was no kiss, not yet, just presence. And that was more powerful than anything else could have been in that moment. We sat like that for a long time. Two women, grown and weathered by life, finally allowing ourselves to lean into something unspoken and true. When I left that evening, the stars had come out. I walked home slowly, the cool air brushing against my skin like a gentle reminder that I was still here, still breathing, still capable of feeling something new. And when I slid into bed that night, I didn't feel alone. I felt full, alive. Like maybe, just maybe, I was becoming myself again. The next morning, I found a note tucked into my mailbox. It was scribbled on delicate stationery, her handwriting elegant and slanted. "Come back tomorrow. There's more to talk about. E." I pressed it to my chest and smiled. Yes, there was more to talk about. And I was ready. The next day, I found myself standing in front of Evelyn's door earlier than we'd agreed, holding nothing but my hands, which fidgeted like nervous children. I almost turned around twice. But before I could knock, the door opened. She must have heard me coming, or maybe she'd been waiting. "You're early," she said, her smile soft and knowing. I didn't want to wait. She stepped aside, letting me in without another word. This time, we didn't go to the kitchen or the sunroom. Instead, she led me into a smaller room off the hallway I hadn't seen before, a cozy den lined with bookshelves, with a wide velvet couch and the warm scent of sandalwood lingering in the air. The window was open slightly, the breeze playing with the curtains. "I thought we'd talk in here today," she said. I sat beside her on the couch, the cushions sinking just enough to draw us closer. Neither of us filled the silence right away. And for once, it didn't feel awkward. It felt intentional. "Did you sleep well last night?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I did. I thought a lot about what you said, about what I felt." She turned slightly toward me. "And I'm not scared anymore. Or maybe I am. But I don't want fear to make my decisions." Her eyes shone a little, as if those words had struck a familiar chord. She reached out and brushed a loose strand of hair behind my ear, her fingers pausing gently at my cheek. Her touch was so careful, like she was afraid of startling me. But I didn't pull away. I leaned into her hand, letting my eyes close for a moment. Just that contact, skin on skin, felt like a language I had once known but forgotten. When I opened my eyes again, hers were already there, waiting for me. "I've never done this," I murmured. "You're doing just fine," she said, her lips curving into a tender smile. It wasn't rushed. Nothing about Evelyn was rushed. That's what made her presence so soothing. She moved through time like she owned it. Like she knew how precious each moment was and refused to waste a single breath. She took my hand and laced our fingers together, and we sat like that, hands joined, bodies close, watching the shadows shift on the walls as the light changed outside. The warmth of her hand traveled up my arm, into my chest, as if thawing something long frozen. "I used to think connection had to be dramatic," I said. "Passionate in that messy, firestorm kind of way. But this feels like finding the right key to a door I didn't know was locked." Evelyn smiled, then leaned in, just close enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath on my cheek. That's how I felt, too. The first time I let myself fall for a woman, it wasn't fire. It was water, deep and steady, and it changed me. Her lips brushed my cheek, not a kiss exactly, more a confirmation. A quiet yes. My skin tingled where her mouth had touched, and I turned to face her more fully, our foreheads nearly touching now. "Do you ever regret not letting it become more?" I asked. She paused. "I used to. But now, with you sitting here, asking the same questions I once did, I feel something healing in me. Like maybe the moment I missed then has found its way back." The weight of her words settled into my chest. I couldn't stop the tears this time. They rolled down without fanfare, just warmth trailing over my cheeks as I looked at her. Not from sadness, from release, from the ache of recognition, finally named. "I've wasted so much time hiding from myself," I whispered. She pulled me gently into an embrace, arms warm and sure around my shoulders. I let myself lean into her, resting my head on her collarbon, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender and thyme. I hadn't let anyone hold me like that in years. "Then let's not waste a single second more," she murmured into my hair. We stayed curled together on that couch as the afternoon faded into dusk. I don't remember what we talked about next. It didn't matter. What mattered was the nearness, the comfort, the deep, grounded knowing that I wasn't alone anymore. When I finally stood to leave, Evelyn walked me to the door, her hand resting lightly on my back. "Come again tomorrow?" she asked, eyes full of gentle hope. I nodded. "I want to." She leaned forward, and this time I met her halfway. Our lips touched, soft, tentative, but certain. There was no performance, no firestorm, just the sweet tremble of something real being born. We lingered there for a moment, then pulled apart slowly, eyes still locked. "Good night, Evelyn," I said, my voice a little breathless. "Good night, love," she replied. As I stepped out into the cool evening air, everything felt different. Not louder, not brighter, just clearer. Like the pieces of me I'd long silenced were beginning to speak again, and I was finally listening. It had become a rhythm, one that felt as natural as breathing. Every afternoon, I walked the short path between our homes. My steps had grown lighter, my thoughts less clouded. I hadn't expected it, how quickly comfort could turn into longing, and how longing, when met with kindness, could turn into something far deeper. That day I brought a photo album with me, one I hadn't touched in years. I hadn't even planned to open it, really. But when Evelyn greeted me at the door, her smile widening when she saw me, I knew I'd made the right choice. "I want to show you something," I said, almost shyly. She stepped aside, letting me in without asking another question. We sat in her sunroom, the one that first wrapped me in its gentle light, and I laid the album between us on the low wooden table. The cover was worn, the edges soft and frayed from time. She reached out and touched it like it was something sacred. My children, my ex-husband, my mother before she passed, I said as I turned the pages. They were my world for so long, but looking at these now, I realize I wasn't in many of the photos. Not really. I was there, of course, but I wasn't living in them. I was doing what I was supposed to. She glanced up at me, her gaze thoughtful. "You were surviving." I nodded. "Yes, but now, I want more than survival." Evelyn reached over, gently closed the album, and placed her hand on mine. "You deserve more." Those 3 words landed deep. I don't think anyone had said them to me with such sincerity. Not in a long time. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting them echo inside me. I used to think it was too late, I admit it, that a woman my age couldn't start over, that anything resembling romance or intimacy belonged to the younger version of myself. But with you, I feel like there's still something waiting, something worth exploring. Her fingers laced with mine again, familiar now, grounding. "It's not about starting over," she said softly. "It's about continuing. We're not beginning. We are continuing in a direction that's finally true." We sat like that for a while, hands held, no rush to fill the silence. Just presence, warm and complete. After a while, she stood and pulled me to my feet. I followed her down the hallway into the room with the velvet couch again, but this time it wasn't about conversation. It was about presence. She lit a candle on the side table, casting soft amber shadows across the walls. We didn't speak. There was no need. She stood in front of me, her hand brushing my shoulder, trailing down my arm. The quiet electricity of being seen, truly seen, moved between us like a current. When her lips met mine again, there was more confidence, more intention. We kissed slowly, like we had all the time in the world. And in that moment, we did. Afterward, we lay side by side, our heads nestled on the same pillow. Her breathing was soft and even. Mine took a little longer to settle. "I don't think I've ever felt this close to someone," I whispered. "It's not just closeness," she murmured back. "It's honesty. That's what you're feeling." I turned to face her. Her eyes were half closed, but her smile was there, peaceful, steady. And for the first time in decades, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Not because someone expected it. Not because it was convenient, but because it was right. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed, wrapped in her warmth, listening to the soft hum of her breath and the occasional rustle of the wind outside. I felt no guilt, no shame. Only the quiet joy of discovery, of being wanted, cherished, held with care. In the morning, she made tea again, and we stood by the window watching the world stir to life. A dog barked in the distance. Somewhere a lawn mower buzzed, but we were still unbothered by the noise of life. "I don't know what comes next," I said, fingers grazing the rim of my cup. "You don't have to," Evelyn replied. "You only have to want it." And I did. That afternoon, I returned home briefly to water my plants and answer a few messages from my daughter. But the whole time, my mind was with Evelyn, her laugh, her touch, the way she made space for all of me. In the weeks that followed, we didn't make declarations. There were no grand speeches or romantic ultimatums. But there were more notes in my mailbox, more mornings spent together, more quiet walks through her garden, hand in hand. The neighborhood didn't change. The world didn't shift. But inside me, something had been rewritten. Not erased, just rewritten with care, with truth. One day, Evelyn gave me a key. She didn't say anything as she placed it in my hand, just smiled and pressed her forehead to mine. And I knew. This wasn't a chapter closing. This was one finally beginning. For the first time in my life, I wasn't living for others. I was living for myself. And somehow, in doing so, I found someone who had been waiting, not to rescue me, not to define me, but to walk beside me wherever the road might go. And I was ready for every step of it.